the young and the restless spoilers. In the quiet yet turbulent town of Genoa City, where secrets lurk in every corner, a new storm was brewing within the Newman household. Faith, Nick and Sharon's daughter, had been observing her mother's erratic behavior with growing concern. Sharon had been diagnosed with a severe mental health disorder and was prescribed medication to manage her symptoms. However, lately, Faith noticed alarming changes in her mother's demeanor. Faith tried to convince herself that it was just a phase, but the evidence was mounting. Sharon had stopped taking her medication, pretending that she was fine and dismissing the drugs as unnecessary. "I don't need those stupid pills," Sharon often muttered to herself, attempting to convince not only herself but also those around her. But Faith knew better. She could see the signs of her mother's illness creeping back with a vengeance. The situation reached a breaking point one evening when Faith found Sharon in the living room, staring blankly at the wall, muttering incoherently. Faith's heart pounded in her chest as she cautiously approached her mother. "Mom, are you okay?" she asked gently. Sharon turned to her, her eyes wild and unfocused. Faith's stomach churned with fear. This wasn't her mother, at least, not the mother she knew. One fateful night, the family's worst fears materialized. Sharon, in a fit of delusion, mistook Faith for Phyllis, her longtime rival. In her twisted reality, Sharon saw Phyllis as a threat, and her mind snapped. She lunged at Faith with a fury that was both shocking and terrifying. Faith screamed as she tried to fend off her mother, but Sharon's strength, fueled by her madness, was overwhelming. Faith's cries echoed through the house, reaching the ears of her father, Nick, who was in his study. He rushed to the living room, his heart nearly stopping at the sight before him. Sharon was attacking their daughter, her face contorted in a mask of rage and confusion. Nick sprang into action, pulling Sharon off Faith and restraining her. "Sharon, stop. It's Faith, your daughter," he shouted, but his words fell on deaf ears. The damage was done. Faith was left battered and bruised, both physically and emotionally. Nick immediately called for an ambulance, and Faith was rushed to the hospital. She was in a state of shock, her mind reeling from the terrifying encounter. Nick stayed by her side, holding her hand, trying to soothe her as they waited for the doctors to assess her injuries. Sharon, meanwhile, was taken into custody. The police arrived and, seeing the state she was in, decided that she needed to be held for her own safety as well as others. It was a heartbreaking scene as she was led away in handcuffs, still mumbling incoherently about Phyllis. At the hospital, Faith was treated for her injuries, which, fortunately, were not life-threatening. However, the emotional scars ran deep. She couldn't understand how her mother could become so violent, so unpredictable. Nick sat by her bed, his heart heavy with worry and guilt. He knew that Sharon's illness was beyond her control, but it didn't make the situation any easier to bear. In the days that followed, Sharon began to regain her clarity. The fog of her delusions lifted, and the reality of what she had done hit her like a ton of bricks. She was filled with remorse and shame. The woman who had attacked her own daughter was not her true self, but rather a manifestation of her untreated illness. Tears streamed down her face as she begged for forgiveness. "Faith, I'm so sorry," Sharon wept, her voice breaking with anguish. "I didn't know what I was doing. Please, forgive me." Faith, despite her trauma, could see the genuine remorse in her mother's eyes. It was a long road to recovery, but she knew that Sharon was not the monster she had encountered that night. She wanted to believe that her mother could get better, that this was just a dark chapter in their lives that they could overcome together. It was clear that Sharon needed more help than they could provide at home. The doctors recommended that she be admitted to a psychiatric facility where she could receive the intensive treatment she needed. It was a difficult decision, but one that Nick and Faith knew was necessary. As Sharon was taken to the psychiatric hospital, Faith and Nick held on to each other, finding strength in their love and determination to support Sharon through her darkest hours. Faith's resilience shone through as she began to process her trauma, understanding that her mother's actions were not out of malice but rather the result of a severe mental health crisis. Sharon's journey to recovery was just beginning, and it would be a long and challenging road. However, the family was committed to seeing it through. They knew that with the right treatment and support, Sharon could reclaim her life and return to them stronger and healthier.